Hey, you finally found what you were looking for. As you listen to my voice and feel the gentle frequencies in the background, you'll notice your body beginning to sink deeper into your bed. Each breath slower, each muscle softer, and with every word, your thoughts become quieter. You can let go now. You can rest. This is your journey. Welcome to Dreams of Duty. Now, before we begin this journey, take a moment just to breathe. Breathe in slowly. Feel the air fill your chest and breathe out, letting everything go. Again, breathe in and breathe out. Each time, a little deeper, a little calmer. With every breath, your body softens, your thoughts drift further away, and the world outside becomes distant and quiet. You are safe here. You are calm. You are ready to dream. It was a time immeasurably distant, long before men had learned to count their years in orderly calendars, long before the walls of Sparta, Mycenae, or Troy had ever seen the first stone set in place. In those days, the gods walked openly among mortals, shaping destinies with the merest flick of their fingers, whispering secrets into the ears of kings and heroes alike. The skies were vast, a tapestry of gold and crimson at dawn, and silver and violet at twilight, as the winds carried the scents of the seas, the forests, and the fertile valleys where civilization itself would one day rise. Across the shimmering plains of what the ancients would one day call Asia Minor, Troy stood upon its hill like a jewel in the sunday. Its walls, vast and unbroken, rose higher than the tallest trees. The stones etched with runes of divine protection. Priam, king of Troy, ruled this city with wisdom and justice. He and his queen, Hecuba, bore a prodigious family, 50 sons and 50 daughters, each child a testament to their power and legacy. Some would become warriors, others seers, yet all were bound by the fate woven by the gods themselves. Among Priam's children, Hector shone as the crown jewel of Troy's military might. He was second in skill only to Achilles, his sword and spear extensions of his will. His heart was devoted to Troy, and his love for his wife Andromache and their son Astyanax knew no bounds. He was a man of honor, his name spoken with reverence by allies and enemies alike. Yet the royal family also bore sorrow in the form of Cassandra, whose beauty and intellect were unparalleled but cursed by the god Apollo. She foresaw every calamity, every turn of fate, yet none would heed her warnings. Her voice, clear and unerring, was met only with ridicule, as if the very truth were madness. Paris, the youngest son of Priam, entered the world under the shadow of prophecy. Hecuba, in a dream, saw Troy consumed by flames, its walls toppled, its people scattered like leaves in a storm. She decreed that the infant should be abandoned, yet the shepherd tasked with this grim duty could not harm the child. He raised Paris in secret, unaware that the boy would one day be both Troy's doom and its fleeting hope. Far across the sea, in the kingdom of Sparta, Zeus, king of Olympus, took mortal form, transforming himself into a swan to seduce Queen Leda. From this union came two eggs, bearing not only mortal children, but beings touched by the divine. Castor and Pollux, twin sons, Clytemnestra, a daughter whose cunning and wrath would shape kingdoms, and Helen, whose beauty would ignite wars. Helen's radiance was unmatched, and as she came of age, kings, princes, and warriors traveled great distances to win her hand. Fearing the bloodshed her marriage might bring, Odysseus of Ithaca proposed a binding oath. Each suitor would swear to protect Helen's chosen husband. Once every man had sworn, Helen chose Menelaus of Mycenae, a king whose might and wisdom were known far and wide. Yet this oath, designed to prevent war, would instead become the very chain that bound Greece to conflict. Meanwhile, Mount Olympus seethed with envy and ambition. The wedding of Peleus and Thetis, attended by gods and heroes, had slighted Eris, goddess of discord. She cast among them a golden apple inscribed, "To the fairest," igniting a quarrel between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. None could resolve it, and Zeus, unwilling to offend the goddesses, chose a mortal for judgment. Paris, a shepherd unaware of the divine burden placed upon his shoulders. Aphrodite, recognizing his desires, promised him Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, setting into motion a chain of events that would bring both glory and ruin. Paris traveled to Sparta, and there, by Aphrodite's subtle magic, Helen fell in love with him. Her abduction ignited outrage in Menelaus, who summoned the armies of Greece, calling upon all suitors to honor their oath. The mightiest kings and warriors answered: Agamemnon, the ruler of Mycenae and brother to Menelaus; Odysseus, clever beyond measure; Nestor, wise and ancient; Diomedes, young and strategic; and Achilles, whose name alone struck fear into the hearts of men. Achilles, raised by the centaur Chiron and dipped into the river Styx by his mother Thetis, was all but invulnerable. Yet his heel, untouched by the waters, would remain his one weakness. His destiny was twofold: a long, uneventful life, or a short, glorious existence, immortalized in song. When envoys came for him, Thetis sought to hide him among the women of Skyros, disguising her son as one of them. Yet Odysseus, cunning and patient, uncovered Achilles through a clever ploy, revealing the warrior to the world, and together with Patroclus, his dearest friend, he joined the Greek fleet, ready to strike at Troy. But even as these preparations unfolded, the gods chose sides. Athena and Hera favored Greece, while Apollo, patron of Troy, and Ares, lured by bloodshed, took up the defense of the city. Poseidon, jealous of the Trojans' devotion to Apollo, sided with the Greeks. The world of mortals and gods alike trembled, for the war that would come was as much divine as human, and fate itself was a battlefield. The Greek fleet, vast and formidable, faced delays due to the anger of Artemis, who demanded a sacrifice for her sacred deer slain by Agamemnon. The king's daughter, Iphigenia, was taken, her life given to appease the goddess. and only then could the winds carry the armada to Troy. Along the way, cities were pillaged, women taken as spoils of war. Yet conflicts within the Greek camp, particularly between Agamemnon and Achilles, threatened to undo their unity. In Troy, the greatest warriors marshaled their strength. Hector, Aeneas, and allies from Lycia and the Amazons prepared for siege, their courage bolstered by the presence of gods on their side. 9 years of war would follow, battles of strategy, valor, and tragedy, with each hero's fate entwined with the others, and the walls of Troy bearing witness to deeds that would echo through the ages. Thus, the first chapter of fate, of love, ambition, and divine intervention, set the stage. Troy, proud and beautiful, stood ready to face the storm, unaware that its doom had already begun, and that the lives of kings, warriors, and gods alike were bound together in a tapestry of war that would be sung by poets for all time. The 9th year of the siege of Troy stretched across the land like a shadow that refused to lift. The sun rose each morning over the Aegean Sea, illuminating the gleaming walls of Troy, the golden spires of its palaces, and the banners fluttering from its towers. Yet it revealed nothing of the suffering endured within. The Greeks, weary yet undaunted, encamped upon the plains, their ships lined along the coast like the teeth of some massive beast, poised to bite into the heart of the city. Their warriors, the finest mortals Greece had ever produced, polished their armor and sharpened their spears, for every day could bring glory or death. Achilles, son of Thetis and Peleus, remained withdrawn from the main army, brooding in his tent like a storm yet to be unleashed. His heart was a tempest of rage, the theft of Briseis, the woman awarded to him as his prize, festering into a searing wound that not even his mother's comforting whispers could soothe. His tent, a sanctuary of polished bronze and embroidered tapestries, bore silent witness to his sorrow, and Patroclus, his loyal companion, often sat at his side, offering counsel, reminding him of honor, duty, and the fragile thread of friendship that tied them to life. In Troy, Hector moved with purpose, rallying his soldiers along the ramparts, his helmet gleaming in the morning sunday. He looked down upon the Greek encampments, knowing the faces of many who would soon fall under his spear. Each warrior held a story, a family, a past, yet in the eyes of Hector, they were instruments of fate, playing a role in the symphony that would decide the destiny of his city. The gods, ever watchful, stirred above the battlefield. Apollo descended, his radiant aura igniting the hearts of the Trojan archers, inspiring them to shoot with deadly precision. Athena, meanwhile, whispered strategies to Diomedes, guiding him through the chaos of war, while Hera strengthened the resolve of Agamemnon, urging him toward victories that would feed both his ego and the Greek cause. Ares, bloodthirsty and untamed, reveled in the carnage, riding the winds of battle wherever he was summoned. Poseidon, ever jealous, moved unseen, undermining Trojan fortifications and stirring the seas to hinder supplies reaching the city. The clash of armies began with a sound like thunder, each roar and cry a testament to courage and fear intertwined. Swords clanged against shields, spears pierced armor, and the cries of the fallen mingled with the bellowing of war horses. On the Greek side, Ajax, both greater and lesser, carved a path through the Trojan ranks, their shields rising and falling like the tides of the sea. Diomedes, with Athena's guidance, struck down warriors with uncanny precision, his spear moving as if guided by the hand of the goddess herself. Yet for all their might, Troy held. Its walls were divine in construction, every stone imbued with the favor of Apollo and the skill of Poseidon's unacknowledged hand. The Greeks, despite their skill, battered against unyielding stone, losing men to the arrows that rained from the battlements. Hector moved among his troops, inspiring them with words of courage, his sword cutting paths through the advancing warriors, his shield protecting the young and inexperienced, and his very presence a bulwark against despair. It was then, in the heat of conflict, that Patroclus came to Achilles. The young warrior's face was pale with worry, his eyes wide with unspoken pleas. "Achilles," he said, voice trembling, "the Achaeans falter. Troy presses close to our ships. If you will not fight, I must at least wear your armor and drive them back." Achilles, struck by a mixture of pride and sorrow, saw in Patroclus the reflection of his own unspent fury. He consented, giving Patroclus his bronze armor, his shield, and the mighty helmet that bore the mark of his name. Patroclus, now clad as Achilles, rode onto the battlefield like a god descended. The Trojans faltered at the sight, mistaking him for Achilles returned. Spears shattered against shields, arrows struck true, yet faltered against divine protection. And Hector, recognizing the pattern of slaughter, steeled his heart. He rallied the Trojans, urging them to stand firm. Yet when he came face to face with Patroclus, the truth of his vulnerability was undeniable. One swift stroke, and Patroclus fell, his life extinguished by Hector's blade. The Greeks mourned and raged in equal measure. Achilles, upon hearing of Patroclus's death, was seized by a grief so profound that it threatened to consume him entirely. He tore the hair from his head, bellowing in anguish, and cast aside his adornments. Thetis, his mother, appeared at his side, her eyes glistening with tears that reflected both love and sorrow. "My son," she whispered, voice like water over stone, "you must choose. Either the quiet of a long life or the blazing fury of your name, etched in memory forever." Achilles chose the latter. The new armor, forged by Hephaestus himself and resplendent with the fire of Olympus, was placed upon him. Bronze and leather gleamed under the sun, and his shield, a masterpiece depicting both war and peace, reflected the weight of destiny. With every step he took toward Troy, the earth seemed to tremble, the gods themselves holding their breath. Hector, knowing the end was near, prepared for his final confrontation. He donned his finest armor, kissed his wife and son goodbye, and addressed his troops with words that would echo through eternity. "Fight for Troy," he cried, "for your homes, your children, and the honor that binds us together. Should I fall, let my death be the seed of courage in your hearts." The meeting of Achilles and Hector was inevitable. 3 times Hector circled the walls of Troy, Achilles in relentless pursuit, each pass a dance of death and valor. When at last they met, the clash was monumental. Bronze rang against bronze, the ground shook, and for a moment time itself seemed suspended. Hector's strength, courage, and honor were vast, yet against Achilles, driven by grief and divine might, he was mortal. Hector fell, his life extinguished, and Achilles, in a display of wrath and anguish, dragged his body around the city. Troy's inhabitants wept, and the gods above looked on, some with sorrow, others with grim satisfaction. King Priam, in an act of desperate humanity, approached Achilles and begged for his son's body, appealing to the warrior's memory of grief and loss. Moved, Achilles relented, allowing the body to be returned to Troy for proper mourning. Yet even as the city grieved, the war continued. Paris, guided by Apollo, loosed a poisoned arrow that struck Achilles in the heel, ending the life of the greatest warrior of his age. Without him, the Greeks faltered, and Troy's defenders tasted hope. But cunning and strategy would soon rise where brute strength had fallen. Odysseus, relentless and ingenious, conceived of the plan that would immortalize his name: the wooden horse, hollowed and filled with the bravest Greek warriors, a symbol of deception that would decide the fate of Troy. Thus ended the 9th year of war, with heroism, sorrow, divine intervention, and cunning all entwined. The siege had tested courage, honor, and fate itself, yet the final chapter, the fall of Troy, remained unwritten, a dark horizon that loomed over both mortals and gods alike. The 10th year of the Trojan War dawned with a grim resolve. Troy, though battered, still stood upon the plains of Asia Minor, its golden towers reflecting the early light of the sun, the walls seeming eternal yet haunted by the echoes of the fallen. The city's defenders, led by King Priam and his surviving sons, moved with solemn purpose, aware that each day could bring either salvation or complete ruin. The air smelled of blood, sweat, and the smoke of distant fires. For 9 long years, the Greeks had battered the city, wave after wave of soldiers attacking and retreating, yet the mighty walls, blessed by Apollo and the secret hand of Poseidon, had held firm. Within the city, the sorrow of loss hung heavy. Hector's absence was a wound that festered among the Trojans, the memory of their greatest warrior, a constant reminder of their vulnerability. Andromache, Hector's grieving widow, wandered the streets, holding Astyanax close, her heart shattered yet beating with the fragile hope that somehow Troy might endure. Cassandra, cursed by Apollo, had predicted this doom long ago, yet her warnings remained unheeded, a tragic voice crying into the void. The Greeks, now leaderless without Achilles, faced despair of their own. The loss of their greatest warrior weighed heavily on every commander, yet Odysseus, cunning and relentless, refused to surrender. Observing Troy from his ship, he saw the defenders' fatigue and the fraying morale of their opponents, and a plan formed in his mind, a plan so bold that it would echo across centuries. The idea of the wooden horse was born, a vessel of deception that would bring the Greeks within Troy's walls without a single siege weapon. Crafted by the finest shipwrights and carpenters, the horse was colossal, its body hollowed to conceal a select company of Greek heroes. Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, and a handful of others would hide inside, ready to strike when the city's defenses were down. The exterior of the horse was adorned with polished wood, intricately carved symbols of peace and victory, a gift to the Trojans that seemed too grand to refuse. Its size alone was a marvel, towering over even the tallest walls, and its beauty fooled the eyes of even the most cautious Trojan sentries. As dawn broke one morning, the Greeks dismantled their encampments and retreated to the horizon, leaving the horse standing alone upon the plain. From the walls of Troy, Priam's sons and generals observed with disbelief, some cheering, others wary of treachery. Within the city, the people debated its meaning. Some, like Cassandra, warned that it was a trap, that the Greeks' retreat was a ruse designed to bring destruction within their gates. Her voice, shrill with desperation, was drowned by the laughter and mockery of those too blinded by hope and fatigue to heed caution. The Trojans decided, against the pleas of Cassandra, to bring the horse into the city as a trophy, a symbol of the war's end and their impending victory. Its sheer size required the combined effort of dozens of soldiers, and its ascent into the city was accompanied by cheers, drums, and songs of triumph. Women and children, unaware of the fate that awaited them, marveled at its craftsmanship. And yet, as the night descended, a shadow of unease lingered over the city, a whisper of dread that only Cassandra seemed to hear. Night fell, and Troy slept, lulled by the illusion of peace. Within the hollow horse, Odysseus and his companions waited, hearts pounding, weapons ready. They were poised to strike at the signal, yet every moment seemed eternal, a test of patience, courage, and nerve. Outside, the city was silent except for the occasional snore or creaking door, and the faint, ominous sound of wind through the alleys. Then, at the appointed hour, the signal was given. Torches flickered along the Greek fleet, returning under cover of darkness, while from the horse, the hidden warriors emerged. Silent as shadows, they dispatched the unsuspecting guards, opening the gates for the fleet that had sailed back to the coast. The Greek warriors poured into the city like a tide of vengeance, their swords striking down any who resisted. The once great streets of Troy, filled with life and laughter, became corridors of death and fire. King Priam, though aged and wise, could not withstand the fury of the Greeks. He met his end at the hands of Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, who drove a dagger through the king's heart within the walls of his own palace. Hector's widow Andromache and son Astyanax faced horror beyond imagining, the child thrown from the battlements and the mother taken into slavery, bound to serve as a concubine to Neoptolemus. Cassandra, whose prophecies had long been dismissed, took refuge in Athena's temple, only to be violated by Ajax the Lesser. Athena's wrath struck him down, casting him into the sea. Yet Cassandra's torment continued when she was taken as a concubine by Agamemnon, returning with him to Mycenae. The city burned, a conflagration that illuminated the night sky, the walls crumbling under the relentless assault. The cries of the innocent mingled with the roars of combat, echoing across the plains, a testament to the price of hubris and betrayal. Troy, once mighty and revered, lay at the mercy of the Greeks, its people scattered, its heroes slain, its destiny irrevocably changed. Amidst the carnage, Aeneas, son of Aphrodite and cousin to the royal family, gathered a small group of survivors. Together, they fled the burning city, carrying with them the hope of survival, the seeds of a future yet to be written. Across the Mediterranean, they journeyed to the shores of Italy, where Aeneas would begin anew, sowing the foundations of a lineage that would eventually give rise to Romulus and Remus and the fabled city of Rome. Meanwhile, Menelaus and Helen returned to Sparta, weary but alive, ruling once more as king and queen. Odysseus, cunning and patient, set sail for his homeland of Ithaca, beginning a journey that would last 10 long years, filled with monsters, enchantments, and trials that would test his mind, body, and spirit to the limits. The Odyssey, his epic journey, had only just begun, a tale that would intertwine heroism, cunning, and the relentless pursuit of home and destiny. The fall of Troy marked the end of one age and the beginning of another. Heroes were immortalized in stories, cities were rebuilt or forgotten, and the world itself seemed to shift beneath the weight of fate and divine will. The wooden horse, a symbol of cunning and deception, remained in memory as a lesson that victory often came not through strength alone, but through intelligence, patience, and the subtle hand of the gods. And so, the 10th year of the Trojan War concluded, leaving behind a world forever changed, where the echoes of the fallen, the curses of the gods, and the triumphs of mortals would resonate through history, immortalized in song, story, and legend. The end of Troy's downfall marked not just the conclusion of a war, but the beginning of a journey unlike any other, one that would test the very limits of human endurance, intelligence, and spirit. Odysseus, the wiliest of the Greek kings, stood upon the shores of the Aegean Sea, watching as the flames of Troy's once mighty city consumed the night sky. His heart, heavy with grief for the friends he had lost, including the unparalleled Achilles and the loyal Patroclus, was nonetheless resolute. He knew that he, above all, must return to Ithaca to reclaim his kingdom and his family. Yet, fate and the gods had woven a path for him that would stretch over 10 long years, filled with perils beyond imagination and encounters with beings both mortal and divine. Odysseus's journey began with promise. With the Greek fleet once again assembled and the spoils of Troy in tow, he and his men sailed toward the open sea. The winds, once held hostage by Artemis due to Agamemnon's cruel sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia, now blew favorably, and the fleet moved swiftly, carrying warriors exhausted yet still determined. However, as with all things ordained by the gods, calm waters were fleeting. Poseidon, angered by the Greeks' desecration of Troy's walls and the taking of treasures sacred to him, harbored a deep grudge against Odysseus, whose cunning had brought ruin to the city that Poseidon himself had helped fortify. Before long, a storm of unimaginable ferocity struck the fleet. Waves taller than the highest towers of Mycenae crashed over the ships, snapping masts, tearing sails, and hurling men into the merciless sea. Many vessels were destroyed, and Odysseus himself was separated from the main fleet, clinging to the remnants of a broken mast. Exhausted and battered, he washed ashore on a strange island, unknown to the maps of mortals, and shrouded in an eerie mist that carried the faint sound of voices, both human and inhuman. Here began the true Odyssey, the trials that would etch his name into legend. The first challenge presented itself in the form of the Lotus Eaters, a people who lived in serene isolation, consuming a narcotic fruit that dulled the mind and sapped the will to return home. Odysseus sent scouts to trade with the inhabitants, but soon discovered the danger. Men who tasted the lotus forgot their homes, their families, and the very purpose of their lives. Their eyes glazed over, their hearts heavy with apathy. Odysseus, with a mixture of compassion and stern resolve, dragged his men back to the ships, forcing them to flee the island lest they succumb entirely to forgetfulness, their memories and identities lost forever to the alluring fruit. No sooner had they escaped than the shadow of cyclopean terror fell upon them. Odysseus and his crew arrived at the island of Polyphemus, a solitary giant of a man, son of Poseidon, whose gaze could crush men and whose strength defied imagination. The Greeks, curious and daring, ventured into his cave, initially hoping for hospitality, only to discover the monstrous truth. Polyphemus trapped them, sealing the entrance with a stone boulder heavier than a dozen ships, and began devouring the men, one by one, with horrifying efficiency. Odysseus, known for his cunning, devised a plan of escape. He offered the Cyclops wine, intoxicating the giant, until he fell into a deep stupor. Then, using a sharpened olive branch, Odysseus and his men blinded the monster, burning their courage into his memory. Yet, hubris and the need for recognition proved costly. As the Greeks fled their vessel, Odysseus could not resist revealing his identity, shouting across the waters. Polyphemus, enraged, prayed to his father Poseidon, cursing Odysseus with storms, shipwrecks, and delays, ensuring that his return to Ithaca would be long and fraught with peril. The journey continued, each encounter testing the limits of their courage. The winds carried them to the island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who gifted Odysseus a bag containing all the unfavorable winds, leaving only the favorable ones to guide him home. But his men, curious and distrustful, opened the bag just as Ithaca appeared on the horizon, unleashing a tempest that drove them far from their course. For weeks, they were tossed across the waters, their supplies dwindling, their spirits waning. Next came the Laestrygonians, a race of giants whose appetite for human flesh and colossal strength destroyed all but Odysseus's own ship, leaving him and his closest companions to drift alone across the sea. The very skies seemed to conspire against them, lightning flashing across the horizon, the sea boiling with Poseidon's rage. Yet perhaps the most formidable challenge awaited in the form of Circe, the enchantress of Aeaea. With her magic, she transformed men into swine, their human forms and minds lost to spellcraft, their memories fading into oblivion. Odysseus, aided by Hermes and given a protective herb called moly, confronted Circe, resisting her enchantments and forcing her to restore his men to human form. They remained on her island for a year, learning the arts of navigation, gaining provisions, and receiving knowledge of the dangers that awaited in the unknown seas ahead. From Circe's council came the fateful warnings of the sirens, whose song lured sailors to destruction, promising knowledge and visions too beautiful to resist. Following her instructions, Odysseus bound himself to the mast, sealing the ears of his men with beeswax, and endured their haunting melodies without succumbing to madness. The sirens' voices, whispering secrets of the past and future, threatened to unravel his mind, but through discipline, cunning, and sheer willpower, he survived. Further trials awaited with Scylla and Charybdis, two monstrous entities situated on either side of a narrow strait. Scylla, a six-headed creature, snatched men from the deck of passing ships, while Charybdis, a great whirlpool, threatened to engulf entire vessels. Odysseus, guided by Circe's advice and his own strategic thinking, chose to sail closer to Scylla, sacrificing a few to preserve the majority, a harrowing decision that weighed heavily upon his conscience. The journey also took him to the island of the sun god Helios, where his men, despite repeated warnings, slaughtered the sacred cattle for food. Helios, enraged, demanded vengeance, and Zeus obliterated the offending ship with a thunderbolt, sparing only Odysseus and leaving him to drift alone toward Calypso's island, Ogygia, where the nymph detained him for 7 years with promises of immortality, love, and comfort. Odysseus resisted, yearning for his wife Penelope and his homeland, finally escaping with divine aid from Hermes, who commanded Calypso to release him. At last, after 10 years of trials, loss, cunning, and sheer endurance, Odysseus approached Ithaca. Yet the final challenge remained: to reclaim his throne, restore order, and reunite with his wife Penelope, who had withstood suitors and societal pressure, preserving her fidelity through clever ruses and patience. The journey, though ending in the sight of home, was far from over. Odysseus's cunning, bravery, and resilience would be tested one last time, proving that even the wisest and most courageous of men must face both mortal and divine challenges before achieving the reward of peace. After 10 long and harrowing years wandering the seas, Odysseus, king of Ithaca, finally approached the familiar shores of his homeland. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the rugged cliffs and hidden coves of the island. His heart, though filled with relief, remained heavy with trepidation. Ithaca was no longer the peaceful kingdom he had left behind. It had been overrun by suitors vying for the hand of his faithful wife, Penelope, believing him dead. These men, from wealthy families and neighboring regions, had taken control of the palace, consuming Odysseus' wealth, dishonoring his servants, and mocking the very legacy he had built over decades. Odysseus arrived on the rocky shore, accompanied only by a loyal few, including his son Telemachus, whom he had not seen since the boy was an infant. Telemachus had grown into a man of wisdom and courage, guided by Athena, the goddess who had long favored Odysseus for his cunning and intellect. The reunion between father and son was at once joyful and bittersweet. Each man had suffered in the absence of the other. Each had carried grief and longing through years of uncertainty. Their embrace was silent but profound, for words could not capture the weight of 10 years spent in longing, fear, and hope. Before reclaiming his throne, Odysseus had to assess the state of his kingdom. Disguised by Athena as a beggar, he entered his own palace, observing the suitors and the chaos they wrought. They laughed, drank, and feasted, oblivious to the eyes that watched them. They mocked the servants, disregarded the laws of hospitality, and treated Penelope with disrespect, testing her loyalty and resolve. Penelope, for her part, remained dignified and clever, employing stratagems to delay choosing a new husband, including the weaving and nightly unweaving of a funeral shroud, a tactic to postpone her suitors indefinitely. Odysseus, aware of the divine guidance surrounding him, began his careful planning. With Telemachus's assistance, he gathered intelligence about the suitors, noting their strengths, weaknesses, and loyalties. He allowed no outward sign of his true identity, enduring humiliation, taunts, and even physical abuse at the hands of the brashest suitors. Yet each insult and slight was meticulously stored in his memory, a record of debts and offenses that would soon be repaid with precision and justice. The fateful day approached when Odysseus would reveal himself and reclaim his household. Penelope, still unaware of her husband's return, announced a contest. She would marry the man who could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads lined in a perfect row. The suitors, confident in their strength, attempted the task, laughing at the seemingly impossible challenge. One by one, they failed. Straining and contorting with effort, their pride shattered with each unsuccessful attempt. Odysseus, still in disguise, observed silently, noting the folly and arrogance of those who had so brazenly defiled his home. When the suitors had exhausted themselves, Odysseus, guided by Athena, stepped forward. In a single, fluid motion, he strung the great bow, a feat none in Ithaca had managed for decades. The string sang under his hands, the tension perfect, and the arrow flew with unerring accuracy through the 12 axe heads. The hall fell silent, the suitors frozen in disbelief, and Penelope, though cautious, sensed the truth behind the beggar's eyes. The massacre began with lethal precision. Odysseus, Telemachus, and a handful of loyal servants struck with swiftness and cunning. Spears flew, swords clashed, and arrows found their marks. The suitors, armed only with their arrogance, were no match for the combined strength, skill, and divine guidance of Odysseus and his allies. Walls and pillars rang with the sounds of battle, the echoes of vengeance resounding through the palace halls. One by one, the suitors fell, some pleading for mercy, others attempting futile resistance, all ultimately meeting the fate they had earned through years of disrespect, greed, and betrayal. Even amidst the carnage, Odysseus maintained control, ensuring that no innocent servant or loyal member of the household was harmed. His wrath was measured and just, aimed only at those who had defiled his home and usurped his authority. The palace, once filled with chaos and mockery, slowly fell silent, save for the sobs and cries of those who had survived and those who mourned the dead. Penelope, finally confronted with the truth, tested Odysseus' identity with cunning of her own. She ordered their bed moved, knowing that he had built it himself, carved from the trunk of an olive tree rooted firmly in the palace. Odysseus, recognizing the impossibility of moving the bed, revealed his intimate knowledge of its construction, and thus proved beyond doubt that he was truly her husband, returned after 20 long years of war, wandering, and trials. Their reunion, though delayed by years of suffering, was profound, a culmination of loyalty, intelligence, and love that had withstood the tests of time and fate. Odysseus's trials, however, were not yet fully concluded. Word of his return spread across Ithaca, reaching neighboring islands and regions. Old alliances were tested, rivalries rekindled, and some who had once opposed him sought to challenge his rule. Yet with the support of loyal subjects, the counsel of Athena, and his own unmatched cunning, Odysseus quelled dissent and restored order to his kingdom. Justice was meted fairly, with loyalty rewarded and betrayal punished. Ithaca, though scarred by war and time, began to thrive once more under the rule of its rightful king. In the end, Odysseus and Penelope found a hard-won peace. The palace was restored, the household reorganized, and the kingdom strengthened. Telemachus assumed a role befitting his noble lineage, guiding Ithaca with wisdom beyond his years, ensuring that the trials endured by his father and himself would lead to a legacy of stability and prosperity. The story of Odysseus's return, the slaughter of the suitors, and the reclamation of Ithaca would be told for generations, a testament to the endurance, cunning, and resilience of the human spirit, and a reminder that even the most formidable trials can be overcome through courage, intelligence, and steadfast loyalty. The wind that swept across the plains of Troy that night carried the scent of ash and salt. It moved through the ruins of tents, over the bones of the fallen, and across the scorched sand where once the greatest armies of men had clashed for 10 long years. It was a strange wind, neither of life nor death, but of endings. The moon hung low over the Aegean, pale and heavy, and beneath it stood the city of Troy, its proud towers weary but unbroken. The war had devoured everything. Kings had grown old beneath the walls, children had become soldiers, and even the gods seemed tired of watching. Inside the city, the people whispered of omens. The fields outside were empty, now the Greek ships gone, their fires extinguished, their camps abandoned. Only silence remained, and in the heart of that silence, hope began to stir. From the highest tower of Ilion, King Priam looked out upon the plain. His old eyes, dim with grief, found something strange in the moonlight. There, at the center of the abandoned battlefield, stood a colossal shape. It loomed motionless, its shadow stretching across the broken earth, a horse, vast and hollow, carved from cedar and cypress, its surface gleaming faintly under the moon. The old king called for his sons, for the elders, and for the priests. Together they stood upon the battlements, watching the dark outline with a mixture of awe and suspicion. The wind moaned around them, whispering in voices that none could quite understand. "Behold," said Antenor, his voice trembling, "the Greeks have left a gift." "Or a curse," murmured Cassandra, the king's daughter, standing at the edge of the tower, her face pale as marble. Her eyes were wide not with fear, but with the agony of foresight. She saw not wood, but blood, not victory, but ruin. "No," said Laocoon, the priest of Poseidon, "this is deceit. I feel it in my bones. The Greeks are not gone. This horse, it is a trap, a mockery of the gods." But the people below were already gathering at the gates, drawn by curiosity and joy. After 10 years of fear, starvation, and death, The idea of peace was intoxicating. They wanted to believe that the gods had relented, that the sea had swallowed their enemies. As dawn broke, the light revealed every detail of the monstrous sculpture. The wood was carved with symbols, spirals, waves, and the names of fallen kings. The craftsmanship was exquisite, divine even, as if Athena herself had guided the hands that built it. When the gates opened, a tide of Trojans flooded out onto the plain. Children ran before their parents, laughing, their voices sharp in the cold air. Soldiers followed, dragging the horse closer to the city, its massive wooden hooves gouging trenches in the earth. The priests chanted hymns to Poseidon and Athena, giving thanks for the end of the war. Flowers were thrown at the horses' feet. But from the cliffs far to the north, a figure watched, cloaked in rags, eyes glinting with cunning. It was Sinon, the Greek left behind, the deceiver chosen by Odysseus himself. When the Trojans found him bound near the ruins of the camp, his story was ready, that he had been abandoned, betrayed by his own comrades, and that the horse was an offering to appease the goddess Athena, whose temple the Greeks had defiled. "If you destroy it," he warned, voice cracking with feigned fear, "the wrath of Athena will fall upon you. But if you take it into your city, Troy will be blessed, and her walls will never fall." "If you list the strain and cost," the crowd murmured. Even the elders hesitated. The name of Athena carried weight, the goddess of wisdom, of war, and of destiny. To defy her was to defy fate itself. Laocoon stepped forward, anger burning in his eyes. "You fools! Do you think the Greeks have left so easily? Do you not remember their cunning, their lies?" He seized a spear, its iron tip glinting in the sunlight, and hurled it at the horse. It struck deep into the wooden flank, and for a moment, all fell silent. The sound echoed hollow, resonant like the beating of a distant drum. Something inside stirred. But before anyone could speak, the sea roared. Two monstrous serpents rose from the foam, crimson and green, their scales glistening. They coiled through the waves and struck, seizing Laocoon and his sons in their jaws. Their screams filled the air as the creatures crushed them and slithered away toward the temple of Athena. The people fell to their knees. "It is a sign," they cried. Laocoon was punished for his blasphemy. Only Cassandra wept, her voice lost in the din. "You blind men, you bring your doom within your walls." By evening, the horse stood inside the city. The gates closed. Torches flickered against the wood as the people celebrated through the night. Music echoed through the streets. Wine flowed like rivers. For the first time in a decade, Troy slept without fear. And from within the belly of the beast, the Greeks listened. Hidden among the beams and ropes, Odysseus, Menelaus, Neoptolemus, and their chosen warriors waited in silence. Sweat dripped down their faces, their armor muffled beneath layers of linen. They could hear the songs, the laughter, the distant tolling of bells. The smell of burning incense drifted through the cracks in the wood. Hours passed. The city grew quiet. Drunken shouts faded into snores. From the harbor came the faint creak of ships, returning the fleet that had pretended to sail away, now gliding back under the cover of darkness. Odysseus pressed his ear to the wooden wall. "Now," he whispered. A single spark flickered in the darkness. The ropes unwound, The hatch fell open, and one by one, the Greeks emerged into the moonlight. Their eyes gleamed with the reflection of the flames they were about to unleash. They moved like shadows through the sleeping city, blades drawn, hearts hardened by 10 years of loss. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, led them to the gates. His youth burned with fury, his face lit by vengeance. With steady hands, they opened the bolts and raised the signal torch. From the sea, the Greek fleet saw the fire and rowed faster. By dawn, Troy was burning. The screams of its people rose like a storm. The streets ran red. Men fought in vain. Women clutched their children and prayed to gods who no longer listened. Priam fell before the altar of Zeus, struck down by the same rage that had once slain Achilles. Cassandra was dragged from the temple of Athena, her prophecies finally fulfilled, her voice breaking in despair. And from the citadel, as the flames devoured the towers and the wind carried the ash toward the sea, Odysseus watched not with triumph, but with silence. The war was over, yet the taste of victory was bitter. He knew the gods had not finished with them. No man destroys a city so blessed without paying the price. When the sun rose fully, Troy was gone. Only the smoke remained twisting, eternal, rising toward the indifferent heavens. And in that smoke, the gods watched, silent and satisfied, as the age of heroes came to its end. The first light of dawn bled weakly through the smoke that still veiled the ruins of Troy. The air reeked of salt, iron, and burning cedar. Ash drifted like snow across the shattered courtyards, coating the bodies of soldiers and civilians alike, the young and the old, the proud and the broken. The cries of the dying had faded, leaving only the faint crackle of collapsing roofs and the hiss of flames devouring what was once the greatest city of men. Odysseus stood upon the steps of the ruined palace, his armor blackened, his eyes hollow. The fires painted his face in shades of gold and blood. Around him, Greek soldiers moved through the smoke like phantoms, collecting spoils, dragging prisoners, setting torch to anything still standing. The victory that had been promised the end of 10 years of war now hung over them like a curse. Behind him, Menelaus climbed the marble stairs, his sword slick with crimson. His breath came hard, each step echoing through the once great hall where Priam had ruled for decades. His gaze swept the carnage, and at last it came to rest upon the shattered doorway leading to the queen's chamber. "Helena," he whispered. She stood within the chamber's ruin, her hair loose, her gown torn, her eyes wide but unbroken. Time seemed to stop between them, husband and wife, king and queen, victim and cause. The firelight trembled across her face, revealing not the seductress of myth, but a woman hollowed by years of fear and guilt. Menelaus raised his sword. The blade quivered. For an instant, the weight of 10,000 deaths hung upon his arm, and then, slowly, his hand fell. The steel struck the floor with a dull clang. "Too much blood," he murmured. "The gods have had their fill." Helena bowed her head. "And yet they are never satisfied," she said softly. Odysseus turned away. He could not bear to watch. There was no justice left in this war, only exhaustion. He descended the palace steps and looked toward the sea. There, beyond the ruined walls, the ships waited dark outlines against a crimson horizon. The wind carried the faint sound of waves, steady and cold. He thought of Ithaca, of the olive trees, the quiet hills, the laughter of his son, the patient gaze of Penelope. But even as he closed his eyes, he could not see them clearly. The smoke of Troy clouded everything. "Odysseus," called Nestor, his voice ragged with weariness. "The men are ready. We leave with the tide." Odysseus nodded. "Let the sea take what the fire has spared." As the Greeks prepared their ships, another man walked among the ruins. Aeneas, prince of Dardania, his cloak torn and his sword broken. Around him moved the survivors of Troy, women carrying children, old men limping with makeshift staffs, boys clutching whatever weapons they could find. They followed him like shadows, drawn by the only thing left, hope. He paused before the fallen gate, where the giant hinges hung, twisted and blackened. There he turned to his people. "This city is no more," he said, his voice steady though his heart ached. "But we are not ashes yet. The gods have taken Troy, but they have not taken our destiny. We will find another shore, another home. The spirit of our fathers will live through us." An old man wept. A child clung to his leg. The wind carried his words out to sea, as if even the gods themselves listened. In the distance, a rumble echoed thunder without storm. The sky darkened slightly, and the sea seemed to rise and fall with an unnatural rhythm. Odysseus, watching from the beach, frowned. Poseidon had not forgiven them. That night, the fleet set sail. The torches on the shore dwindled until they vanished, leaving only the faint red glow of the burning city behind them. The sea, black and restless, stretched ahead, vast and indifferent. Odysseus stood at the prow of his ship, the wind biting at his face. The stars above were bright, but they offered no comfort. Each man aboard carried ghosts of comrades lost, of children left behind, of the faces they had slain. Victory had no taste now, only weight. As the coastline faded, a sudden gust struck the sails, fierce and sharp. The sea roared, the ships lurched. Men shouted, ropes snapped, and waves crashed over the decks. Odysseus grasped the railing, eyes wide. "Poseidon," he whispered. Lightning split the sky. In that instant, he saw the god vast and terrible, his trident raised, his beard tangled with seaweed, his eyes burning with rage. "You took my city," the god thundered, his voice shaking the heavens. "You defiled my altars, drowned my priests, and raised your hand against my will. You will wander, son of Laertes. You will know every sorrow that the sea can bring." The wind howled. The waves rose higher. The ships scattered like leaves. Odysseus shouted orders, but the storm swallowed his words. The sea became a chaos of foam and darkness. He saw one ship overturn, another torn apart by lightning. Men fell into the blackness, their cries vanishing beneath the roar of the ocean. Hours passed, or perhaps days. When the storm finally broke, the sky was gray and cold. The sea was calm again, but most of the fleet was gone. Only a few battered ships drifted across the water. Odysseus stood drenched and silent. Around him, his men bailed water, their eyes hollow with fear. The god's curse hung in the air like mist. Far behind, on the smoking coast of Troy, Aeneas led his people toward the mountains. The fires had died down, but the ruins still glowed faintly, as if the city's soul refused to fade. Aeneas carried his father Anchises upon his back, and in his arms his son Ascanius walked beside him. The old man's voice trembled with prayer. "Do not look back, my son. The city is gone. Ahead lies fate." "I will not look back," Aeneas said. And so he walked through ash, through silence, through the last echoes of an age that was ending. Behind him, the walls of Troy collapsed in a final sigh. Ahead of him lay centuries of legend. As dawn rose once more, the smoke thinned. The sea shone gold beneath the new Sunday. The gods watched from their high thrones, each with their own thoughts. Athena turned her face away. Poseidon sank beneath the waves, and Zeus, high in his seat, said only this: "The age of heroes is done. Let the age of men begin." Odysseus's ship drifted onward, battered but unbroken. The horizon was empty, endless water and sky. He did not know where he was, nor when he would see home again. But in his heart, a flame still burned, small, fragile, but alive. And somewhere, far behind him, in the ruins of Troy, the wind whispered through the ashes of the fallen. All wars end, but no victory is without loss. The wind was quiet now, almost too quiet. The sea that had once roared with the anger of gods lay still and gray beneath a pale dawn. Odysseus stood at the bow of his ship, staring at the horizon as if it might speak to him. His cloak was torn, his beard wet with salt, and his eyes, once sharp with cunning, now glimmered with exhaustion. Around him, the survivors of the storm moved slowly, haunted by silence. They were men who had faced a decade of blood and flame, and yet what broke them now was the stillness, the waiting. They did not know where they were. No stars guided them, for the sky was veiled in mist. The gods had hidden their faces. For a long time, no one spoke. Then a young sailor named Eurylochus broke the silence. "Lord Odysseus," he said quietly, "are we cursed?" Odysseus did not answer at first. He traced the horizon with his eyes, then looked down at his trembling hands. "Yes," he said finally, "we are cursed. But curses are not chains, only trials. And trials can be endured." He turned, his voice gathering strength. "Poseidon may have taken our path, but he has not taken our will. We sail east toward the rising Sunday. There must be land beyond the mist, Idnot and Tavor." And so they sailed day after day, through fog and fear, through waves that whispered like ghosts. Each night they made offerings to the gods, hoping to earn forgiveness. But the gods were silent. On the seventh day, the fog began to lift, revealing dark shapes ahead. "Land!" cried one of the men. It was not a welcoming sight. Black cliffs rose from the sea like the teeth of a monster, and the air smelled of rot and sulfur. Yet Odysseus ordered the ships forward. They needed food, water, rest, anything that resembled safety. As they neared the shore, they saw a narrow cove, calm enough to anchor. They rowed in and disembarked, their legs unsteady from weeks at sea. The sand was dark, the sky heavy with clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a strange rhythmic sound echoed like thunder muffled beneath the earth. Odysseus motioned for silence. "Stay close," he whispered. "The land is not empty. Nothing ever is." They followed a narrow path inland, winding through twisted trees and steaming pools. The air grew hotter with each step until they reached a wide valley filled with columns of smoke. There, they saw them, giants. Towering creatures with single eyes and arms thick as tree trunks, moving among pens of goats and sheep. The Cyclopes. Eurylochus gasped. "By the gods!" "Silence!" Odysseus hissed. "Do not speak their names." The men crouched behind rocks, watching as one of the giants lumbered toward a cave, dragging a bleeding goat. Inside, they heard the sound of cracking bones and laughter, deep as thunder. Odysseus's mind raced. They needed food, but to steal from such creatures was madness. Still, hunger was a cruel master. "Stay here," he ordered. "I will see what lies within that cave." Before they could protest, he crept forward, silent as shadow. The cave's entrance was massive, framed by jagged stones. Inside, the air smelled of milk, smoke, and blood. He moved deeper, his hand upon his dagger, until his eyes adjusted to the dim light. There were racks of cheese, piles of firewood, and skins of wine enough to feed an army. He motioned for his men to join him. They rushed in, filling their hands with food. For a brief moment, they smiled. Then the ground shook. A shadow filled the entrance. A single, enormous eye glimmered in the dark. The Cyclops had returned. Odysseus froze. His men dropped their spoils and backed away, trembling. The giant sniffed the air. "Who trespasses in my home?" His voice rolled like thunder. He stepped inside, blocking the light. With one motion, he rolled a boulder across the entrance, sealing it. The men were trapped. Odysseus swallowed his fear and stepped forward. "We are travelers," he said. "Our ship was broken by the storm. We come in peace, only seeking food and shelter." The Cyclops grinned, revealing teeth like stone. "Peace?" he growled. "I know no peace." With terrifying speed, he reached down, grabbed two of the men, and smashed them against the rock. Their cries ended instantly. The monster devoured them, bones and all, as the others screamed. Odysseus' heart pounded. But even in terror, his mind worked. He knew force would not save them, only cunning. When the Cyclops Polyphemus, son of Poseidon, finally lay down to sleep, Odysseus whispered to his men, "Do not despair. I have a plan." He pointed to a great staff of olive wood, resting by the wall, taller than any man, thick as a mast. "Sharpen it," he said. "And when I give the signal, strike." They worked in silence through the night, shaping the wood to a deadly point, then hardening it in the fire's glow. At dawn, Odysseus took a skin of wine and approached the giant. "Lord of this cave," he said, bowing low, "we offer you a gift." The Cyclops snorted. "A gift from thieves?" "Wine," Odysseus replied. "The drink of kings. A gift for your strength." Polyphemus took the skin and drank deeply. The sweet fire burned in his throat, and he laughed. "More!" he roared. Odysseus gave him more, again and again, until the giant's eye grew heavy and his words slurred. "What is your name, little man?" he asked, swaying. "My name," said Odysseus with a cunning smile, "is nobody." The Cyclops grinned, then collapsed in drunken sleep. "Now," whispered Odysseus. Together they drove the spear into his single eye. The roar that followed shook the mountain. Polyphemus screamed, thrashing and clawing at his face as blood and smoke filled the cave. "My eye! My eye!" he bellowed. "Nobody has blinded me!" The other Cyclopes outside shouted in confusion. "Who hurt you, brother?" "Nobody," they laughed. "Then stop crying, fool!" Blind and enraged, Polyphemus rolled aside the boulder, groping for his prey. But Odysseus had already tied his men beneath the bellies of the goats. When morning came, the giant felt only their backs as he let the animals out to graze. As the last goat passed into daylight, Odysseus crawled free. He looked back once, his chest heaving. "Tell your father," he said, "that Odysseus of Ithaca blinded you." Polyphemus roared, lifting his arms to the sky. "Father Poseidon, curse him! Let him never reach his home! Let storms hound him, and death take those he loves." The sea answered. As Odysseus's ship sailed from the shore, dark clouds gathered once again. The waves swelled. The wind howled. Poseidon's wrath had only begun. It was the 11th year of the war, the 11th turning of seasons since the Achaeans had first arrived upon the golden shores of Troy. For a decade, the city had stood defiant against the mightiest warriors of Greece, its walls carved by the hands of gods, and its defenders hardened by blood and loyalty. Yet now, as the sun rose over the plain, a grim silence settled over the Greek encampments. The plan, whispered in the shadows by Odysseus and crafted with cunning unmatched by mortal minds, was ready. The fate of Troy would no longer be decided in open battle, but through a deception so brilliant, so terrible, that its story would echo through the ages. Odysseus, the wiliest of all Greek kings, had devised a ruse born of both desperation and genius. Before the walls of Troy, he ordered the construction of a great wooden horse, towering and magnificent, carved with craftsmanship so precise it seemed almost alive. Its form mirrored the strength of Achaean warriors, its hollow interior deep enough to conceal the bravest among them. Within the secret cavity would hide Odysseus himself, alongside Menelaus, Diomedes, and a chosen band of the finest Greek warriors, each sworn to strike when the time came. The horse was not merely a vessel. It was a weapon of cunning, a symbol of deceit, and a testament to human ingenuity in the theater of war. When the Trojans first beheld the colossal wooden figure, they were awestruck. Standing at the gates of their impervious city, its polished surface gleamed in the morning sun, its carvings intricate and breathtaking. Some whispered that it was a gift from the gods, a peace offering to end the long and bloody conflict. Others, more wary, suspected trickery. Among them, Cassandra, cursed prophetess and seer of misfortune, shrieked her warnings. Her voice, hoarse from years of ignored prophecy, cut through the air with urgency. "Beware! This is no offering. It is a trap. Do not bring it within the walls." But as always, her words fell on deaf ears. The Trojans, their desire for peace and their pride in their indomitable city clouding their judgment, dismissed her warnings as the ravings of a madwoman. Priests and elders, soldiers and citizens alike, urged the horse to be brought inside. The massive wheels were greased, ropes tied, and with collective effort, the greatest of Troy's warriors and strongest oxen hauled the wooden colossus into the heart of the city. Joyous cries rose from the streets as the horse was placed upon the central square, its size dwarfing all who surrounded it. Feasts were prepared in celebration, music and laughter echoing from every corner. For the first time in 10 years, the people of Troy believed that the war was finally at an end. As night fell, the city slept, lulled by the illusion of victory and the intoxicating promise of peace. Yet inside the horse, Odysseus and his men waited, hearts pounding and eyes sharp in the darkness. Each warrior understood the weight of their mission: to open the gates to the city and allow the Greek army, hidden nearby under the cover of night, to enter and end the war once and for all. The plan, meticulous in its execution, relied upon timing, silence, and the perfect coordination of human will. When the moon reached its zenith, Odysseus gave the signal. The warriors emerged from their wooden prison, moving swiftly and silently through the shadows. At the city gates, they found the locks unguarded, the defenders lulled into slumber by the false peace of the day. One by one, they crept out and opened the gates, and at that signal, the rest of the Greek fleet, which had remained hidden beyond the horizon, returned. Silent at first, the fleet now unleashed the chaos of war in full force, storming the city with fire and sword, the cries of the dead and dying mingling with the smoke of burning homes and temples. Troy, for 10 long years untouchable, now fell beneath the wrath of those it had defied. Priam, aged and weary, fled to the palace with what remained of his family, but it was of no use. Pyrrhus, son of the mighty Achilles, breached the royal chambers and struck down the king, his dagger piercing the heart of Troy's last sovereign. Within the palace, Andromache and the infant Astyanax were dragged before the conquerors. The child, helpless in his mother's arms, was cast from the city walls, and Andromache herself was taken into slavery, a tragic witness to the horrors that had befallen her people. Cassandra, who had seen all in vision, hid in the temple of Athena, only to be discovered by Ajax the Lesser, whose disregard for gods and mortals alike led him to commit sacrilege. Athena, enraged, struck him down with lightning, and Poseidon dragged him to a watery grave. Yet Cassandra's fate did not improve, for Agamemnon claimed her as a concubine, bringing her to Mycenae, where she would meet her end at the hands of Clytemnestra, who, driven by vengeance for her daughter Iphigenia's sacrifice, murdered the Greek king as he slept. The streets of Troy, once alive with music and life, now lay silent beneath the stars, littered with the bodies of the fallen and the remnants of a civilization brought to ruin. The temples of gods were defiled, the treasures of kings stolen, and the proud city, once a symbol of power and endurance, was reduced to ash and sorrow. Yet, even in devastation, hope endured. Among the few who survived was Aeneas, son of Aphrodite, who led a group of Trojans across the seas to a distant land. There, they would begin anew, planting the seeds for a future civilization whose legacy would stretch for millennia. Menelaus and Helen returned to Sparta, their rule restored, while Odysseus began his journey home to Ithaca, a journey that would take 10 long years and test the limits of human endurance, cunning, and willpower. And thus, the Trojan War ended. Troy, magnificent and eternal in song, fell to the might and guile of the Greeks. Heroes perished, kings were slain, cities destroyed, and yet from the ashes, stories were born. Stories of valor, tragedy, love, and betrayal, destined to echo through all generations. Homer would sing of these deeds, of men and gods intertwined, of fate and choice, ensuring that the memory of Troy, both its glory and its sorrow, would never fade. The Iliad concluded with the death of Hector and the grief of a city, but the Odyssey began, promising new adventures, trials, and the enduring human struggle to return home. Thus, with fire and blood, the walls of Troy fell, the era of heroes ended, and the world was forever changed by the cunning of Odysseus, the wrath of Achilles, the beauty of Helen, and the tragic inevitability of fate. With the walls of Troy reduced to smoldering ruins, and the cries of its citizens silenced forever, the Greek fleet sailed into the wind, leaving behind a city that had once been the pinnacle of power, now fallen to cunning, fire, and the inexorable cruelty of war. Yet the end of the war did not mean the return of peace to Greece. For many of its heroes, the journey home would prove as perilous as the decade-long siege itself. Among them, none faced trials so formidable, so fraught with divine opposition and mortal danger, as Odysseus, the wiliest of the Greeks, whose mind had devised the plan that toppled Troy, but whose body and spirit would endure sufferings unmatched by any other. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, set sail with the remainder of his men, weary but resolute. Their ships, scarred from years of battle, glided across the Mediterranean waves, carrying warriors whose hearts were still heavy with loss. They had witnessed the deaths of comrades, the fall of princes and kings, and the devastation of cities. Yet even in this moment, Odysseus knew that the gods watched, that the favor of some and the wrath of others would shape every league of their voyage. Their first stop was the land of the Cicones, along the western coast of Thrace. Here, the Greeks, driven by hunger and the lust for plunder, raided the city, sacking its temples and carrying off its treasures. But the Cicones, calling upon reinforcements from surrounding villages, counterattacked with ferocity. Odysseus and his men fought valiantly, yet the Greeks suffered heavy losses, learning the first cruel lesson that their journey home would not be free from danger. Next, their ships were drawn to the land of the Lotus Eaters, a strange and sun-soaked coast where the inhabitants offered the Greek men a plant whose sweet taste caused forgetfulness of home and duty. Some of Odysseus's men partook and fell into an enchanted slumber, losing all desire to return to Ithaca. Odysseus, recognizing the threat, seized them by force, dragging them back to their ships, reminding them of their oaths, their families, and their kingdom that awaited them across the seas. The Lotus Eaters' seduction tested the resolve of every Greek, showing that danger often came not from swords or spears, but from temptation and the weakening of the mind. Their journey soon brought them to the island of the Cyclops, Polyphemus, a monstrous son of Poseidon, whose single eye glared with the fury of the gods. Odysseus, curious and prideful, ventured into the cave of the beast, seeking gifts or hospitality, Yet the Cyclops proved a savage host, devouring men whole and threatening Odysseus himself. Here, Odysseus's cunning shone brightest. He offered the Cyclops wine, intoxicating the giant, before blinding him with a sharpened stake in a move both daring and precise. The Greeks escaped, hiding beneath the bellies of Polyphemus's sheep as the blinded monster called upon his father Poseidon to curse Odysseus for the rest of his life. Poseidon, god of the seas, took this plea to heart, vowing that the return of Odysseus to Ithaca would be delayed by trials, tempests, and divine wrath. From there, Odysseus and his men encountered the windswept island of Aeolus, keeper of the bag of winds. Here, they received a gift from the god, a leather bag containing all the contrary winds meant to guide them safely home. But human weakness, ever their undoing, led the men to open the bag prematurely, releasing the winds and casting them back across the seas, farther from Ithaca than before. Each misstep seemed a cruel design, each setback a reminder that the gods watched and tested mortals without mercy. The journey continued through lands of marvel and terror. The cannibalistic Laestrygonians, who crushed ships beneath giant stones. The seductive Circe, who turned men to swine and only relented after Odysseus's courage and the counsel of Hermes. The journey to the underworld itself, where Odysseus spoke with the shades of heroes and his mother, learning of the fates of those he loved and the ultimate cost of war, and the perilous passage between Scylla and Charybdis, where monsters and whirlpools awaited to devour any who strayed. Yet amidst these trials, Odysseus's mind remained sharp, his determination unbroken. Each test forged him further, each obstacle a crucible of experience and cunning. Years stretched into decades as he navigated the whims of gods, the seductions of nymphs, and the treacheries of mortal desire. Time and again, his wit and endurance allowed him to triumph where others would have perished. Back in Ithaca, Penelope, the faithful queen, waited. She endured the passage of 20 years with the hope that her husband might return, fending off suitors who sought her hand, and with it, the throne of Ithaca. She wove a great shroud, promising to choose a husband upon its completion, only to unravel it each night, cunningly delaying her inevitable choice. Telemachus, their son, grew to manhood during these years, navigating the challenges of leadership and loyalty in a land threatened by those who sought to seize his father's kingdom. Finally, after 10 years at Troy and an additional 10 lost to perilous seas and divine wrath, Odysseus returned to Ithaca. Disguised as a beggar, he surveyed his kingdom, noting the arrogance of the suitors and the devotion of the loyal servants. With the aid of Telemachus, the goddess Athena, and his own unmatched cunning, Odysseus plotted the reclamation of his home. One by one, the suitors met their fate, struck down by his bow and spear, their pride and disrespect punished in a manner both precise and terrifying. Reunited at last with Penelope, Odysseus revealed himself not with boast or grandeur, but with the quiet authority of a king restored and a husband vindicated. Ithaca, tested by absence, betrayal, and trial, was renewed in the hands of its rightful ruler. Yet the lessons of Troy and the Odyssey lingered, that war, though ending in victory, leaves scars that time may never heal. that cunning and courage, tempered by patience, endure where brute force fails, and that the gods, in all their caprice, shape the fates of men in ways both cruel and profound. Thus, the story of the Trojan War concluded not with the fall of Troy alone, but with the journeys, losses, and triumphs of those who survived. The Iliad sang of Hector and Achilles, of honor, rage, and mortality. The Odyssey celebrated the endurance of Odysseus, the resilience of Penelope, and the enduring power of hope. From the ashes of Troy rose tales that would endure for millennia, stories of heroism and human frailty, of divine interference and mortal choice, destined to shape the imaginations of all who would hear them. And so, as the sun set over Ithaca and the waves of the Mediterranean lapped gently against the shores, peace returned at last, though hard-won and forever tinged by the memory of blood, fire, and the price of glory. The heroes of Greece, mortal and divine, faded into legend, their deeds immortalized in song, poem, and memory, ensuring that the names of Troy, Achilles, Odysseus, and Helen would never be forgotten, echoing across the centuries as a testament to the enduring saga of men, gods, and the inexorable forces of fate.